Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the GCNC Worldview podcast. Great to have you all here. It's been a couple of weeks since I did one of these. Travel season is definitely picking up. Lots of our trade show partners at the GCNC are getting rolling. And so we had a bit of a hiatus, but I'm happy to be back. And before we jump into this week's discussion, I want to send out a thank you to the GCNC Worldview sponsors. Ninth Block, great ad agency out of Colorado. They've got folks in Arizona and do work all across North America and around the world for the cannabis industry. They've been a great multi-year partner of the GCNC, and so we want to thank them for helping to make this podcast possible, along with all of our GCNC members and partners around the world. So thanks, guys, and thanks for listening in. Always subscribe if you haven't already. And today I want to introduce to you Nathalie Vanegas, who is the Vice President of International Relations for ABICANN. ABICANN is the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce for Cannabis. And I'm really pleased that quite recently, the GCNC and ABICANN were able to form a partnership where our members are able to benefit from each other's knowledge, the benefits that exist within the organizations, because there is a lot going on in Brazil. The market is huge. Several 100 million people in Brazil, and certainly one of those markets that we've been keeping our eye on now for several years. So Nathalie, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Hello, Chris. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad we are able to do this podcast and to continue our collaboration, because ABICANN and GCNC have partnership agreements, and GCNC members can have benefits on being members of ABICANN and all the benefits we used to give regarding the Brazilian market.
Yeah, I was looking at things that we've been working on now for several months to pull together, and I was on the ABICANN website this morning. And for people who want to know more about ABICANN, of course, we're going to talk about it, but you can also check out their website. And I'm pretty sure that press release we put out together a couple of weeks ago is the first time for the GCNC we've had a press release go out in Portuguese. So it's kind of neat to see. Those are, to me, are nice little landmarks that we can look at and say this really is a global ecosystem serving people all around the world. But before we dive into the details there, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up being one of the original founding members of ABICANN, and sort of the role that you and the association are playing down there right now.
Sure. So I am Nathalie Vanegas. I'm the Vice President of International Relations, and I am multicultural. I was born in Venezuela with my father is Colombian, my mother is French. I was educated in a French school in Venezuela, then I studied in France, and I study food science and agronomy engineer. So this led me to work towards agribusiness project. I had a company in Brazil where I trade agricultural products, fruits, and I work also on agricultural projects in Brazil. As during my studies, I did an exchange in Brazil. I really felt in love with this country. I decided to move back, and I'm like more than 5 years actually in Brazil, leading project with agribusiness and food export and international commerce, as well as brand internationalization in Brazil. And I joined 5 years ago a group of entrepreneurs in Brazil that are promoting the entrepreneurial culture, because the entrepreneurial culture is more developed in United States. You are more entrepreneur than in states like Brazil or even France. And in this group, we start talking about the new tendency, because it was 2015. It was the beginning in Brazil of discussions regarding medicinal cannabis and cannabis-based product as well. And we decided to found an entity that will represent the cannabis industry. Why we decide to build this entity instead of a company? Everybody has the idea of building a company of production and importing, but it was not sufficient in front of all the regulation, and cannabis in Brazil has not yet a federal regulation. So we decided, okay, let's lead the change in Brazil, and let's position, let's get the position of the main leaders of the cannabis sectors in Brazil. So we start idealizing the project in 2015, and now actually in 2023, we are the first entity of entrepreneurial and industrial representation of the cannabis sector. So we are an associated entity, we have financial and administrative autonomy, and we support the development of the cannabis market. So regarding cannabis market is medicinal cannabis and also industrial hemp. In addition to this, we also do the advocacy for the plant in front of the powers and the government. And we are also the only entity that incentive public policies and regulatory proposals. So now we are.
Oh, I was going to say, it's really hard to pull an organization like this together. I want to commend you all for doing it. And once it's pulled together, you know, being proactive enough to actually make an impact. I think it's great, and I've really enjoyed getting to know more about the organization. Currently, about how many companies are part of ABICANN? And side question to that, how many licensed producers are there at the moment in the Brazilian market?
So regarding ABICANN's associate, we are about 100 physical members. And regarding legal entities that are associated to ABICANN, we are about 8 companies. One is, I can mention some of them. New Nature Labs is the first American company that entered in Brazil with a registered product. They are registering their medicine in pharmacies and undergoing clinical studies. We have also others, lawyer offices that are expert in regulatory affairs, and also Brazil, and also a network of regional clinics in Brazil that prescribe cannabis. So in Brazil, I cannot tell exactly how many people have license, because only associations of patients that have been fighting for the rights of patients for a long time, they got in the justice the right to cultivate for medicinal purpose. Because what we have to understand is that in Brazil, the access to medicine, to health, is a right. So as soon as you consider this, you can fight in the justice. So unfortunately, people cannot have access freely to cannabis-based product, but because health is a right, they can sue the government and ask for authorization. So now we have about 400 habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is kind of juridic authorization that allows patients or also and associations to grow cannabis for medical purposes. Yeah, they are also master pharmacies. Master pharmacies have also the right to manipulate the product.
Okay, and when you talk about, because it sort of changes, right, depending on the country and the continent you're in, the definition of what is medical cannabis, and the restrictions. You know, if there is company and they're interested in creating either a partnership or entering the Brazilian market, what do they need to be aware of in terms of, what is considered legal or at least a winnable court battle in this case versus non? And then we should probably also talk about the definition, how they define industrial hemp, because it's always interesting to see how different countries look at all of that.
Yeah. Yes, for cannabis-based products, it is considered, according Anvisa, the main regulatory agency, the equivalent of the FDA, a product mainly with CBD and with less than 0.2% of THC. So actually, Anvisa allowed the permissions of importing cannabis products directly to patients, and there is at least about more than 200 brands registered in Brazil that are exporting directly to patients. And then there are 25 registered products in Anvisa, and that are undergoing clinical study to be registered as a medicine and be able to be distributed in pharmacies and all the drugstores in Brazil. And these 25 products that don't necessarily need to follow the rules of Anvisa. They can have a higher percentage of THC because every product is considered for a specific treatment, a niche market. So for Alzheimer, for multiple sclerosis, for example.
Yep. So it's a long and winding road to get there, but once you get there, there is a pathway for a lot of these. Which is good. Yeah, it's always the trends that we've seen around the world in various forms go along this path, right? First, it's very much a discussion around CBD. That's sort of the safe spot, definitely medical, and then the conversation starts to expand around THC and then minor cannabinoids and all of this. So it is nice to see the growing conversation around Brazil. Complete sidebar here. We'll come back in a second. But you said that early on you studied in France. Is that right?
Right.
Which part of France?
And in the west of France, Rennes, Brittany.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had the good fortune to study for a bit in Clermont-Ferrand, which is sort of south central in general terms. So I'm always interested to hear where people were at. And with the cannabis industry, I've had a chance to go back fairly frequently, mostly Germany, but I try and get through France once in a while too.
Yeah, France, they're very advanced in hemp because they never prohibit the culture of hemp there. They are but it's the first European producer and the second in the world. But unfortunately, regarding medicinal treatments, patients do not have that easy access to information or doctors that can prescribe. So it's a bit controversial as well.
Yeah, it's one of those markets that we'll see. I mean, their pilot project as well down the path, right? So we'll see what happens at the end of that. But circling back, thank you for letting me go down that little rabbit hole for a second. But it also does beg the question a little bit with Brazil. It's a very large domestic market, right? Comparatively speaking, it's a big country. Lots to do there, but is there currently eyes on things like exports? What is the attitude around companies that import? We know that there are some already happening, but when Brazilian legislation is considering its place in the global market, what is the chatter and directionally where do you think it's headed?
Yeah. So what we are doing actually with ABICANN is really we are trying to give awareness about the plant, because Brazil, it's concerning the politician, they don't know much about cannabis and hemp as other countries that start many years ago do. So what we are doing was we are really doing a work of education, of showing how important is the plant, and we are positioning ourselves as the industry, because we really want to develop the industry of cannabis, not only be able to produce or to consume the medical product, but we want to develop an industry, develop research and development, institute of technology, develop all the commodities that can be produced with hemp. So textile, fibers, hemp-create construction. We have identified 21 economical sectors in Brazil, and we are talking with each of these sectors. And we are creating awareness. And we are creating awareness and technical education via our regional events. We will do on March, in 15 days, our last event in Brasilia. It is very strategic because we have invited all the politicians, ministers, representative of the regulatory agency to show how important it is to work on a regulation. And not only a regulation for medical products, but a regulation for veterinarian products, animal use, human consumption, and animal consumption as well, all the construction, textile, and awake all the industry. And now for 2023, we have now this project strategy to build 4 Institute of Technology and Innovation for all cannabis products. And we are going to lead this change. So now we are speaking with the regulatory agency. We have enough power now to give our positioning and our opinion about how cannabis should be considered in this country. So that's why many companies are trying to work with us to try to establish the rules and the regulation they will need to develop their products. So we will have in about 6 months a regulation for cannabis use for pets. Pets in Brazil is a really, really huge market, and many companies are interested to position themselves. So they're starting to work, do networking with vets, with importing companies, while ABICANN is working on a regulation and in building these technological institutes. So that's why it's interesting, because the Brazil has a huge potential, but the biggest barrier in Brazil is all the bureaucracy and regulation. You need really strategic partners that understand the law, understand the regulation, and that can support you. Because even for any other company, it's hard, the Brazilian market. For cannabis, it's even harder. But we want to create the condition that it will be easy and it will be possible to establish projects.
Yeah, it's a repeated story around the world, right? The biggest challenge is always, number 1, stigma and lack of education, and number 2, bureaucratic nightmares. They get in the way of progress. But these institutes that you're starting up, it's really interesting to me. Now, are you going to be doing primary research there as well, or is it really about sort of product development based on existing research that others are bringing to the table?
So tomorrow we have a meeting with the director of the University of São Caetano do Sul, which is a big university in São Paulo, and they want to open an innovation hub. So the objective is to welcome and incubate startups that have project and also research and development investigations, and give all the juridic and regulatory support to allow those startups to have success in the market. And once, as cannabis is permitted for investigation purpose, they can use and manipulate the cannabis. So universities will be able to import the raw material, import the IPA, and maybe in the future be able to cultivate. There is already one university that had the authorization to cultivate on the Brazilian soil for investigation purpose. And we will soon be opening also to investors to try to finance the developing projects. And once you have a product registered in Brazil that has undergone clinical studies with the Brazilian public, the Brazilian genetic, you are more able to commercialize it in the national country instead of importing from abroad and all the bureaucracy to nationalize it. So that's why it's interesting to do like a technological transfer. Companies in United States that have auto technology, Canada or Israel or Germany, can go there with their technology, their project, and develop a project in the Brazilian soil.
Yep. Yeah, I've had recent conversations with various members out of Australia, certainly out of other parts of South America, all very keen on creating partnerships and bringing products into Brazil as, you know, as the legislation becomes more clear. I had a conversation with one of our members in Poland who has products in the pet sector that's interested to hear about what's happening there. So yeah, it's nice to see. It is nice to see how you guys are moving this forward. Frequently, it's you know, these markets come in and there's no resource for people to really tap into and become a part of to help move their country forward. And I think what's going on in Brazil is great. So, you know, if I think giving folks a bit of more of the lay of the land could be helpful when someone comes into Brazil, if they're not familiar with the market at all and they're looking at expansion opportunities there, what is available to consumers today? On if you wanna purchase any product that is remotely tied to the cannabis plant, so whether it's a CBD supplement or you know, a hemp-based product, what can people purchase today without having to go through a court fight?
You mean in Brazil?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now you can have available in pharmacies a CBD based product, but
Yep.
you can buy it with a medical prescription. So actually, patient can have access to the treatment because there are about, among the 500,000 doctors that are in Brazil, 4,000 can prescribe cannabis. They have the formation, and it's there. All these brands that are distributing cannabis products are competing in a market of only 4,000 prescribers.
Yeah, and
so that's why there is a potential for education.
Yeah, well, and how does a potential patient figure out of the 500,000 which the 4,000 are that actually can prescribe it? Are there systems in place that people can use to find those, or is it sort of just word of mouth?
So there are some companies like Clínica Gravital that is developing already 4 clinics of prescription, and they are physical, and also they do remote assistance as well. And also some companies that are trying to export directly to the patient, they need a structure in Brazil, because it is more difficult to get a sales volume when you sell only to one patient per one patient. So what they have in Brazil, they have a structure with a juridic accessory, a juridic corpus that will help patients to get informed about possible treatments. We help patients also to have access financially to the treatment, because if patient don't have access to the treatment financially, they can get to the court to ask for their health insurance. And if it doesn't work, they can also go to the court and ask for the government to pay for their treatment. So that's why the government has to finance this. And the most successful companies that are more able to sell individually to patients are those that have an assistant for patients with doctors and a juridic team that can help them have access to the treatment. So that's why Brazil is complex, because once you don't understand this, you cannot succeed to sell to the patient. You need this structure. Yeah. And some have understood, other not. But now what are the companies are competing? It's on educational courses. We need to form more doctors. because the more doctors, the more region you can access, the more patients you can access, and the number of patients is huge. Like I have numbers here. We have 2 million patients with autism, 1.5 million with cancer, 1.2 million with Alzheimer, 1 million with epilepsy, like 10 million with endometriosis, and 73 million with insomnia. All these diseases can be treated with cannabis. And actually, we have about 100,000, 200,000 patients that have access to the treatment in front of millions of patients. So they still have lands to grow for companies.
Yeah, I feel like we're, in that potential, we are standing on maybe, 1 square meter of land, and around us is a whole country of opportunity still. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about ABICANN, about what's going on in Brazil. I know you're doing these events, but if people want to reach out to you or to the organization for more information and to get a little bit more detailed on specific opportunities, what's the best way for them to approach you and to reach out?
Sure. So they can go via the ABICANN website regarding subscribe, and they can now put their name, email, and ask a question, and we receive all the demands, and then we answer immediately. We organize a call to understand what's the company purpose, or what does the person looks for in Brazil, and we can give the support. So you can get associated as a single person, or you can get associated as a legal entity, and we will give you all the support you need to succeed in the Brazilian land that is a bit dangerous.
Perfect.
Not wanting to insecure people.
Yeah, no, the cannabis industry is not for the weak at heart. It's for the people who are willing to put in the work and continue to be diligent in working through the challenges and blocks that are put in front of us. But and of course, our GCNC members have direct access to all of that information as well. And we're always interested in hearing from folks who are helping to drive the global cannabis ecosystem forward. This has been great to talk with you, Nathalie, and everybody out there in podcast land who listen to us. Make sure, as you're having these kinds of conversations about emerging market opportunities, that you share these kinds of podcasts out, because this is the source, one of the primary sources of information around the world for what's happening, and the experts that are actually on the ground making it happen, not just talking about it. So Nathalie, thanks so much. Thanks everybody. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time on the GCNC Worldview.